Hey guys, so let us continue to the the deeper part of Angular 2 routers. For now, we have seen that we have created two routes over here for about and services, and from about, after click on this particular list, I go to about details, and we are able to read this particular, the ID for the parameter from the query string. So today we are going to talk about now more about Params observables. What is it, and to understand this particular concept, we are going to build a example over here, and let us see how it works out for us. For example, now what I really want to do is over here, I'll be having some hyperlinks over here like previous and next, and I can browse through the details of the list which is there in the my about. So every time I really don't need to come to my about tab. I can directly navigate it to by using my next and previous buttons, uh, and let us see how I can achieve that particular thing. So I can directly deep dive to my about details component over here, and I'll start making my hyperlinks. Okay, so my hyperlink is, I'll just go over here, come here, and I'll say write my a tags, you know just rather than thing over here, I'm writing it down. I'll be writing my a tags, and I'm also going to give some click events to it, and that is nothing but go previous and go next, and I'm going to implement these methods into my classes so that I can write my logic into these particular things. How I'm going to do it is I'll just say go previous. I'll just do something like it, and then I'll go to go, something called go next. Go previous, go next. Superb. And from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to okay. I want to really compute down the current ID which is been displayed, and I really want to subtract one out of it to go to my previous ID. So how I'm going to do is I'm just going to access my this dot id. This dot id is nothing but something which we capture in my ng on init, and I am going to deduct one from it to go to my previous id. But this particular id is nothing but string, so I just need to typecast it to a number. So how I'm going to do it, I'm just going to say pass int. I'm going to pass it to it, and whatever value I get out from it, I'm going to assign it to a variable, and that's nothing going to be an id. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing which I had done to my into my about component. That is nothing but accessing a navigate method of the router. So firstly, I'll just go and import my router over here, and I'll just you know inject it into my class. I say private, say router, and that is going to be nothing but router. I'll just copy this up. I'll just say nothing but this dot router dot navigate, and I'm just going to say nothing but it'll navigate to nothing but about, and that is nothing but this particular route, and with some id, and that id is going to be nothing but the id which I have created over here. The same thing, I'm just going to copy this particular logic, and I'll just increment my next. I'll just increment it to go to the next thing. Okay, so this is it. I'll just refresh it. Let me see what happens once you refresh it. Okay, I can see my previous and next you know hyperlinks, but I'll just put PR over here. Cool. So if you can see, when I tap, now the current ID is 2. When I tap previous, it goes down to 1. But the problem is it is not it is not having any effect on the view, if you can see. Okay, I go to next, my URL is changing, but somehow my app template is not getting reflected by the data. So why this particular thing is happening is nothing but the way we are fetching the data from the parameter over here. So here what I'm trying to do is I have already loaded my component by using about details from the click of this particular component which I've given. And then when I tap on previous, I'm again trying to navigate to the same route so that the same module is, rendered again. But Angular 2 is much more smart enough to understand that I'm visiting the route from visiting the route which has already been loaded, and it is displayed on the component which is there in the memory. So in that particular time, this particular method is never called, this particular method, and that's the reason it is not evaluating to the current ID which we are passing out over here from the query parameter, and the template is not really getting loaded over here. This is the main reason behind it. To how are we really going to to achieve this? And this is nothing going to be achieved by using param observables. So I'll just comment my init part over here. I'll just copy my ng on init so that I can write my logic over here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove this logic. So what is there? So if at all you can go to this dot, this dot nothing but active route, there's nothing but this dot route, this one. If you go to params, right, other than going to snapshot, go to something called params, something like this. Now this params, right, this params, it returns a promise. A promise is nothing but something which is used for asynchronous calling, right? So over here, so this is nothing but, so in Angular 2 nomenclature it is called as params is nothing but observable. So it is going to observe, like supposingly if you want to observe these particular params, you really need to subscribe. It is a design pattern of pub sub mechanism. So this is params is nothing but an observable, and you need to really subscribe to it to have, if at all, to get notified when the params change has occurred. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to say subscribe, and this is going to be having an ECMAScript 6 arrow function, and this arrow function is going to be having something called params. So this is nothing but a callback function to the subscribe. So whenever a change is happening on the params, this particular function is going to call. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just initialize this particular this dot id over here. And how I'm going to do is I'm going to just do it like params, and I'm going to access id property like I had did over here. Let me see it works out or not. So now when I refresh things off, it is seen 3 over here. If I go to my previous, you can see my view is also responding to the changes which are there into the URL. If I go to the next, it is 3, 4. If I go to previous, it is 2. Next, it is incrementing. Previous, it is really decrementing the things off. And this is how params observable comes into picture. And so now even the next time this particular route is loaded again, even if it all it is loaded into the memory, ng init would not get called, but we have already subscribed it for the first time when it was loaded for the params observable, and this function would get called each and every time the params is going to be you know um, going to be changed. And this is how we are going to achieve it. So moving out from here, we are also going to talk about something called as optional route. So that means over here, if you can see, right, if I go to app route, you can see I'm telling my Angular router definition that there is going to be a parameter over here, but it is not always necessary. If supposingly I want to keep this particular parameter as, as optional, how am I going to do that? To understand that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, put a back button over here which will take me back to the about component, and I'll highlight and I'll pass on the current ID to that ID to the route, so that when I come over here I can highlight, uh, I can highlight from where I have really, came out from the details page, so that and I'll keep that particular parameter as optional. And let me just, quickly implement it and make you guys understand. So I'll just quickly jump down to my about details page, and I'll just, okay, I'll just go over here and I will just create a back button. So I'll just copy my code which I've already written. Okay, and I'll just format it properly. Okay, so you can see this is nothing but a back button, and there is a click function which is going to be called as nothing but go about. I'll just write a go about over here, and what I'm going to do is, okay, what I'm going to do is the same way, right? I'm going to, use this the router dot this dot, router dot navigate to navigate to my about component, and I'm going to pass an optional parameter to it. And how I'm really going to do is, right, I'm again going to say an array, and it's going to be nothing but my about component, and my about component is, is going to be having an object. So if at all it is there, there is a compulsory parameter, you can pass it directly, but if it is optional, you can pass it as an object. So it Angular2 route, it, it understands. So this is nothing but an optional parameter, and this is going to be nothing but this dot id, which is displayed over here, and it initialized in my ng dot init. Okay, so I guess when I refresh it, you'll be able to see a back button over here, right? A back button is seen over here, and it will, on the click of this particular back button, this particular code is going to be executed. I want to navigate to about, but I don't want to navigate with a compulsory parameter but an optional parameter, and the optional parameter is given by this object. Okay, so now to handle this particular change, what all things I have to do into my about component, I'll quickly go to my about component, and then over here what I really going to do is nothing but I want to, read a parameter from nothing but the query string, because it's going to be optional. How I'm going to do it, I again need to implement my on init, ng on init. So this is nothing but my interface, and over here I'll just implement it, and over here I'll just go down and I'll say, ng on init. Okay, so now this again I'll be using my params observable, okay, by using activated routes. So before accessing it, I'll just, import it, activated route, and then I'll just go down over here. I'll create a private variable called nothing but route, and nothing but activated route. So I'll just go down over here. I'll say this dot route dot params dot subscribe. It'll be having an arrow function, and this is going to be a callback. It'll be called with something called params, and this is going to be, I'll create a public variable over here, and that is nothing but I'll just say it visited id, from about details page, and it is nothing going to be a number. Okay, so how am I going to do it? I'll just say this dot visited, this dot visited id, and it's going to be from params, and my params is going to be having optional param, there's nothing but id, but this is going to be a string and I've declared it to be a number, so I'll just typecast it to a number. I'll just say to be percent. Okay, super. So now this is how I'm going to access my id parameter from the query string, and this is going to be my optional param. uh, okay, so now I'll just go down to my about html over here, and I'll just I'm going to use a class directive over here to put an active class to whatever id I've been selected from my the id I've been coming out from. And how I'm going to do it, I'll just say square bracket class, put an active class when the right side of this particular thing is true. So I'll just write a function selected id, for example, SELEC selected id, and again I'm going to pass this particular instance of topic. I'll just copy this thing, so whenever this is going to be true, active classes is set to this particular list. So once I go over here, I'll just say I'll just implement this. Okay, and once I implement this particular thing, how I'm going to do it is I'm going to have something called t, and I'm just going to return like t would be having an id, and it should match to this dot visited id. If at all it is the t dot id is equal to visited id, it will be having an active, it will be having an active class on it, and it will be visually represented like which one was visited, which particular list was visited earlier, and from where we have come down by pressing the back button. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to let me just remove these things and put in refresh. If you can see, I am not visited any of these as of now, so there is no active button, no active class has been put to these LIs or anchor tags. When I tap over it, I go to 2. When I go to back, you can see consulting is put in, is highlighted. If I go to 3 and come back, okay, 3 was highlighted. Okay, you can see on the URL itself, I'm also having this particular optional parameter been signed. So this is the difference. Even it is not really necessary that there has to be some optional data to be sent. So optional data is nothing but something which you have to write some logic upon. Like for example, I'm passing id to write my highlighting logic. I can even pass any random number to it, any random thing. Like for example, from my about details component, I can pass something like random. I can put random. So if I just see over here, okay, so you can see something called random over here. I can do, but it is not affecting my route in any ways, right? Because these particular parameters which I'm trying to send, these are nothing but optional parameters. And so now I guess it is very much clear for you guys what are optional and what are compulsory parameters. uh, Thanks a lot guys for watching. We'll continue on Angular router in the next video. Thanks a lot.